And, every once in a while, a game comes along that is more than one game, that signals maybe a sea change for one program or another, maybe both. It serves as a warning to the rest of the conference, to the rest of college basketball. Now, we didn't need a warning to know that Florida is the best program in the SEC right now, that Todd Golden is the best coach in the SEC right now. His good buddy Stephen Pearl from Auburn, who spoke to us at the Birmingham Tip-Off Club today, made those declarations without blinking or blushing. And, of course, Stephen's feeling pretty good because he went to Gainesville a week ago and took down his good buddy and the Gators. And as he mentioned today, gave them a wake-up call. And hoo boy, if Florida is going to play with that level of energy and intensity on top of the talent on that roster, everyone else, including you, Arizona, and you, Michigan, and you too, Duke, may be playing for second place, and the Gators may end up going back-to-back for the second time in program history. Not saying, just saying, it could happen. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Skarbinski. This is Scarbo Knows. We appreciate you tuning in on the Sidelines.live network with executive producer extraordinaire Brendan Martin. Thank all of you for watching, for listening. If you're watching later on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's Kevin Skarbinski - Scarbo Knows. And make sure you check out our sponsor, Money Management Services. They've been helping people with their financial needs in the Birmingham area and beyond since 1992. That was the year of the first 12-team SEC basketball tournament right here in Birmingham when Dale Brown almost started a riot trying to defend, as if he needed it, Shaquille O'Neal. All right, let's get into it. And, of course, you can follow me on X at Kevin Skarbinski. And, man, did I get into it with a group of Florida fans on Saturday into Sunday into today, which is Monday, February 2nd, Groundhog Day. And by the way, the groundhog saw his shadow. You know what that means? 6 more weeks of Charles Bediako playing college basketball. Ba-dum-bum. He didn't have much of an impact Sunday in Gainesville as Florida absolutely punked Alabama. And I use the word punked because Stephen Pearl used that about his own Auburn team. They got beat on Saturday night in Knoxville by Tennessee. And after the game, and it wasn't nearly as bad as what Florida did to Alabama the next day. But Stephen said his team got punked. If there is a team that deserves that adjective, it's Alabama from Sunday. Some of these numbers are mind-blowing, what the Gators did to the Crimson Tide in what I still affectionately call the O-Dome. By the way, for those of you Florida fans that think I'm a Bammer, maybe a Barner, you should know that my sons and my money go to the University of Florida. I actually went to the University of Florida as a graduate student. And by the way, I saw Charles Barkley play as an undergraduate for Auburn University when I was a graduate student at UF, way back in the day. So I've got some Florida bona fides here. So believe me when I tell you that the idea of which program is the best in the SEC, if you go back 7 years when Nate Oats got to Alabama, it's been Alabama, Auburn, and Tennessee. They are neck and neck for most wins overall, most wins in the conference. But certainly, since April of last year at the latest, and until further notice, the Gators are on top. And they showed it on Sunday. Look at some of these numbers from this game. And this is why I used the words, you got punked. Points in the paint. 72-26 advantage Florida. Now, we know Florida has the best front line in the country. We knew that going in. We knew that coming into the season. I believed it at SEC Media Days way back in October here in Birmingham. I picked Thomas Houck as my preseason SEC Player of the Year. There you see him pictured, number 10. And I picked Florida to win the league outright in the regular season, which they didn't do last year. They won the tournament before they went on and won the national championship. 72 points in the paint. And the good folks at ESPN Research determined that that is the highest total of paint points in the last 20 years by one SEC team against a major conference opponent. 72. Alabama had 26, despite having a former G League player in the lineup in Charles Bediako. Look at the assists to turnovers. 24-2 by Florida. That's insanity. That doesn't happen, folks. Circle that, stamp it, put it away in your memory bank. You may never see that again. Alabama had 16 assists, and until yesterday, Alabama had one of the best teams in the country in terms of not turning the ball over. They turned it over 18 times. And points off of turnovers, Florida had 25. Alabama had 0. A big, fat donut. 25-0 in points off the paint, which is, points off turnovers. So you take the paint points plus the turnover points, and that's why Alabama's advantage in 3-point points. Alabama made 14 for threes, so they scored 42 from the 3-point line. Florida made 3, giving them 9. So Alabama had a plus 33 advantage from the arc and lost by 23 points. That's how dominant Florida's front line is and was for 40 minutes on Sunday. And if you don't think that those guys weren't motivated, knowing that a former pro who played professional basketball as recently as a couple of weeks ago in the G League here in Birmingham for the Motor City somethings, then you weren't paying attention. They played at another level of effort and energy, getting on the floor, boxing out on the boards, diving for loose balls, just manhandling Alabama. And Alabama didn't handle it at all. That's why I say they punked them. And I don't think you can disagree with that. You don't have to be a Barner or a Gator or an anti-Alabama person to acknowledge that Florida completely manhandled them. And it was as impressive a performance as I've seen all season long. And that includes all the great things that Michigan has done. Watched them beat Michigan State the other night with Yaxel Lindeborg, who was developed by Andy Kennedy at UAB. And now he's got a shot to be the Big Ten Player of the Year, first-team All-American, and maybe win a national championship, unless he has to run into Florida in the NCAA tournament. And I've seen Arizona do great things. I saw them play Alabama here in Birmingham in December and completely dominated and pulled away after a close game in the first half. The Wildcats ran away from Alabama in the second half. And that wasn't as impressive as what Florida did to Alabama yesterday. And, of course, it all comes down to the front line for the Gators. The bigs have to come up big. And, boy, did they yesterday. Look at the production from Thomas Houck, Alex Condon, and Ruben Chinyelu, who turned into a modern version of Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, and Robert Parrish from the old Celtics championship teams of the 1980s. Now, they're not on that level, but they played like it on Sunday. Look at the numbers for those three. They combined Houck, Condon, and Chinyelu for 61 points and 29 rebounds. Think about that. Completely dominated the game. And Ruben Chinyelu, who, if he's not the National Defensive Player of the Year, they should fire everyone who votes for such an award. There was a sequence. I think it was in the, I can't remember now, first half or second half. It doesn't really matter. Everything blurs together when a game gets out of hand the way that one did. Chinyelu switched off on LeBaron Philon. LeBaron Philon is one of the quickest point guards in the country. He's led the SEC in scoring now for some time. He is hard to handle, especially off the dribble. Chinyelu, who is 6'10", goes about 265 on the scale, depending on if he's eating breakfast that day. He switched off on Philon, and Philon could not break him down off the dribble. Could not get past him. Chinyelu forced him to give the ball up to another Alabama guard, Latrell Wrightsell, and Chinyelu got switched off on Wrightsell. Wrightsell tried to break Chinyelu down and could not do it. And I think it ended up being a shot clock violation. Chinyelu shut down 2 Alabama guards in the open floor by himself on a single possession. That is elite defensive basketball. And that kind of effort by everyone on that Florida roster. What did Boogie Fland have? 8 steals to tie the Florida school record. Just an unbelievably complete and utter domination of one good team by a great team. And that's what the Gators are. And that's why I fully believe you'll see them back in the Final Four one more time for the second straight year. And, of course, that leads to a bigger question. As I said, sometimes one game is one game, right? And you have a bad day at the office, and your shots aren't falling, or your biorhythms are down. You don't have the same energy level. You're playing on the road. The crowd is rabid. And look, I gotta say this to the Rowdy Reptiles. Yeah, the G League dropout chant was cute. You guys go to the University of Florida. You're like the Duke of the SEC as an academic institution. You got to be better than that. You got to be more clever than that. You got to come up with something more creative. And I guarantee you, the students in the jungle at Auburn this Saturday, when Alabama heads down there for the first IBOB, that's the Iron Bowl of basketball for the uninitiated of 2026. I guarantee you they'll have a few things to say if Charles Bediako was in the lineup for Alabama. We'll tell you why he might or might not be a little bit later in the show. The jungle inhabitants, they will bring it at a level probably beyond what the Rowdy Reptiles did. And the Rowdy Reptiles were great. The crowd was great. And again, G League dropout, cute. We've seen better. What we need to see is something along the lines of what Duke came up with. I don't know if you guys remember. This was years and years ago. There was a player for North Carolina named Steve Hale. And Steve Hale, either in the offseason or early that season, had suffered a punctured lung. Pretty serious injury. Well, he had recovered enough to play when Carolina and Duke played in Cameron Indoor. And the Cameron Crazies, every time Steve Hale caught the ball with his repaired punctured lung, half of them chanted, "Inhale," and the other half chanted, "Exhale." Inhale, exhale. That is peak student wackiness at a basketball game. So do better, Reptiles. And Auburn's going to show you how to do it on Saturday, I fully believe. But like I said, sometimes things go wrong in a basketball game. You're playing 18 games in the SEC, another 13 or so in the non-conference. You're not going to be at your peak every game. You're going to have bad games. And if you have a bad game when you run up against a great team, as Alabama did yesterday, you're going to lose 100-77. So the question becomes, okay, there are some larger issues here, though. Was that just one game? Or was it a sign that Nate Oats' time as maybe the best coach in the conference is over and done? The record between Todd Golden at Florida and Nate Oats at Alabama has swung wildly and decisively in Golden's favor. Brendan, do we have that? Do we have the record of Todd Golden versus Nate Oats? They've now met 7 times. Golden and Florida have won the last 5. And in 4 of those games, the Gators won by double figures. 2 of those games, yesterday, we'll start with that one, 100-77. That 23-point margin is the second worst loss that Nate Oats has suffered in his 6.5 seasons at Alabama. It's only 1 point off the lowest of lows for Oats. Alabama lost to Oklahoma by 24 back in 2023. So Golden now has given Oats 2 of his 4 worst losses at Alabama. Throw in the 104-82 loss last year in the SEC tournament semifinals in Nashville. That was a 22-point margin. So now, again, in the last 2 times that they have met, Golden has handed Oats 2 of his 4 worst losses at Alabama. Not good for Nate Oats. And this has started a lot of conversation among Alabama fans about Nate Oats' style of play. Of course, we know it's been wildly successful. Nobody else has more SEC championships in the conference than Oats since he got to Tuscaloosa. He's got 4. 2 in the tournament, 2 in the regular season. Golden has won tournament championship last year. But Golden has the big ring, of course, and that does trump everything else. I understand that, Florida fans. So back down, back off on Twitter. I understand a national championship is worth multiple SEC championships. I understand that at this moment, and as I said, going back to last April 7th, when Florida staged that unbelievable comeback in the national championship game to beat Houston, I understand that he's been the best coach in the league and Florida's been the best program in the league. But this is concerning if you're Alabama. Because in the last 2 weeks, on consecutive weekends, Oats and company lost their 5th straight game to Rick Barnes in Tennessee and their 5th straight game to Golden in Florida. That should not happen for a program of Alabama's caliber. Now, Oats is the one that lifted that program to that level. Oats is the one that, as we said, has won 4 SEC championships. He's been to back-to-back Elite Eights. He took Alabama to its first Final Four 2 years ago. Got back to the Elite Eight last year. Alabama had never gone to 2 straight Elite Eights. So now there are some questions. Is that style of play, shoot a lot of threes, push the pedal to the metal, win with guards, win with long-distance shooting, is that good enough to win a national championship? Because that's the ultimate goal, right? That's what everyone's playing for at this level anyway. You can have a very good season without winning a national championship. So I will push back on anyone who has this championship or bust mentality that if you don't win it all, that somehow your season was a failure. That's a failed way of thinking. But that is the ultimate goal. And Alabama is probably, well, not probably, definitely on the short list of the best programs in college basketball over time that has not won the big ring. Go back and look at what they did under the Rocket 8 in the 50s. Go back and examine C.M. Newton's record at Alabama when they gave Indiana its toughest test on the road to that last undefeated national championship in 1976. Go look at what Wimp Sanderson accomplished in Tuscaloosa. All those SEC tournament titles, all those Sweet 16s, but he could never break through that level. Mark Gottfried did good things at Alabama, went to 5 straight NCAA tournaments, got them to their first Elite Eight in 2004. But they haven't been able to break through the way Florida has been able to break through, first under Billy Donovan, going back in 06 and 07, and now with Golden last year, and looking really, really strong in terms of potentially going back-to-back. So the big question in Tuscaloosa is what now? What now, Alabama? Was this just one game? I'm going to give you some hope because I'm not here to be all doom and gloom. I'm not here to rain on your parade. I'm here to be honest and shoot you straight, but I'm also here to give you some reason to believe that you shouldn't pack it in on this season on February 2nd. Because in each of the last 3 seasons, Alabama has lost at least one game in late January, early February, late February, early March by 20 points or more. And yet, they didn't let any of those lopsided losses derail them from accomplishing great things. As I said, the worst loss in Nate Oats' tenure at Alabama by 24 points to Oklahoma in 2023 when Oklahoma was not yet in the SEC. That was the SEC Big 12 challenge at the time. How did Alabama respond to that? They went on to win the SEC regular season championship, the SEC tournament. They were the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. And they got to the Sweet 16 where they got upset by San Diego State. That team was good enough to win a national championship. It just didn't. Then in 2024, Alabama lost at Tennessee by 20, and it lost at Kentucky by 22 down the stretch. And all that team did was rebound to reach the Final Four for the first time in Alabama school history. Pretty good rebound, huh? And then even last year, you'll remember what happened in Nashville when Todd Golden and company put it on Nate Oats in Alabama again, 104-82 in the tournament semifinals. Florida, of course, went on to win the SEC championship and the national championship. But Alabama didn't roll over. They rolled on and got to the Elite Eight. As I said, for the first time in school history, they went to back-to-back Elite Eights. So Florida 100, Alabama 77 sounds bad because it is bad. It looks bad because it is bad. And it looks worse because you had a professional player on your roster, in your lineup, on the front line that got dominated by Florida's front court. So, yes, it looks really bad. But it's not a death sentence. It's not the end of Alabama's season. It doesn't mean that Alabama won't go on to achieve some special things. The real question, though, is where Alabama goes from here. How do they respond to this? And there is an elephant in the room that we cannot ignore. And his name is Charles Bediako. And this is my bottom line on the whole subject. This is a column I wrote for the Birmingham News today. You can find it on al.com. And that's the headline. 3 games, 2 losses, 1 question. Is Alabama's Bediako experiment worth it? That's their record now. Charles Bediako, since jumping back into college basketball, thanks to a temporary restraining order from a Tuscaloosa judge, he's played 3 games for Alabama. Alabama's lost 2 of them. Now, they've lost to 2 of the better teams in the conference, 2 of the better programs in the conference, 2 of the better programs in the country in Tennessee and Florida. And then in between, they ran Missouri off the court in Coleman Coliseum. But at some point, and now is not really the time, but at some point when this season ends, and it's going to end in the NCAA tournament for Alabama, it's either going to end with them making a Cinderella run to the first national championship in school history, or it's going to end somewhere short of that. But after it is all said and done, and they put the balls away, and they hang up the sneakers, everybody connected with that program, Nate Oats, Greg Byrne, the athletic director, Peter Moeller, the university president, the players, the boosters, the fans, they're going to have to look in the mirror. And they're going to have to ask themselves this question: was it worth it? Was it worth it to play a player in clear violation of an NCAA rule? Because that's the thing that separates Bediako from James Najee and other G League players that are now playing in college basketball, or other European pros that are playing in college basketball, like Filip Jovic at Auburn. Bediako played college basketball for 2 years for Alabama. Put his name in the draft, stayed in the draft beyond the deadline to pull out of the draft, at which point, according to NCAA rule, you are now foregoing your remaining college eligibility. So that's a rule. Bediako's breaking it. That's why he had to sue the NCAA to be able to play this second semester, his last semester as a college basketball player. That's why on Friday, there's going to be a preliminary hearing in front of a new judge, the original judge, who, thanks to really good reporting by AL.com, my friends there, and they discovered that the original judge who issued the temporary restraining order that allowed Bediako to play had, over a long period of time, donated to Alabama athletics somewhere between $100K and $249,999. Now, some people say that's because he and his wife had season tickets for a long time to Alabama football games. He wasn't giving money directly to Alabama basketball. Still, it's an appearance of a conflict of interest, and he rightly recused himself after that news came to light. So now there's a new judge in charge of the case. He scheduled a hearing for Friday. Bediako's asking for a preliminary injunction. If he is granted the injunction, he will probably be able to play the rest of the year, because they will not get this case into a courtroom, Charles Bediako v. NCAA, until after the season's over. So this is a really important week for Alabama. First of all, they've got to, well, they probably should burn the game tape from Sunday. I don't know what you would gain from watching that again. They need to move on. They need to turn the page. They need to get ready for a completely different style of play And the team that is currently in first place in the SEC, Florida's in second place. The team that's currently in first place is Texas A&M. And it will be a homecoming for Bucky McMillan, who was born and raised in Alabama, played high school basketball at Mountain Brook, played college basketball at Birmingham Southern, started coaching AAU teams in the summer while he was still playing college basketball. He knew from a young age he was going to be a coach. And then he won 5 state championships at Mountain Brook. Then he went to Samford University. Martin Newton, the AD there, recognized that his style, his personality would translate to the next level. All he did at Samford was win 3 SoCon championships, which they'd never done before. Got them to the Final Four for the first time in a quarter century. I'm sorry, not to the Final Four, to the NCAA tournament for the first time in a quarter century. And except for a bad call, would have beaten Kansas in the first round. And now look what he's doing in College Station. Got the last open power conference job. Had to put together a roster in a terrible hurry and somehow found the right pieces, the right personalities that would fit his philosophy, his style of coaching, in which everybody's going to play, and you better play balls to the wall every second you're on the floor, or you won't be on the floor anymore. You better get on the floor. You better dive for loose balls. You better have your tongue hanging out when it's time for you to get subbed out. And if you're open, shoot the ball. Not in the mid-range, from 3 or at the rim, or get to the line. And that has translated very well to the SEC, because now here's A&M at 7-1, leading the SEC almost halfway through the conference season. And so Alabama's got to welcome the Aggies to Coleman Coliseum. And by the way, something to think about for the future. I don't know when this day is going to come, but it comes for every coach. And there will come a day when Nate Oats is no longer the Alabama basketball coach. Most likely it will be because he leaves for another job. Most likely it will be, or maybe not most likely, but certainly there's a chance it will be to take an NBA job. He has a great affinity for NBA basketball. He brings in former NBA assistants to his staff. When one after another of his assistants get head coaching jobs, it's another sign of a really good head coach, that people want to hire your assistants because you've had a lot of success, as he's had in Tuscaloosa. So when the day comes, whatever pulls him away from Tuscaloosa, and there is an opening, that opening is going to tug on the heartstrings of Bucky McMillan. He's an Alabama fan from a very young age. And it's going to be very special for him to take a team into Coleman Coliseum on Wednesday. That team will be ready to play. That team will play with great effort and intensity. And Alabama better match it far better than it did in Gainesville against Florida on Sunday, or they're going to take another L. And then, before you even get to Auburn for the first IBOB of 2026 on Saturday, Charles Bediako, his case has to go into a Tuscaloosa County courtroom on Friday. And there's no guarantee. You would have to think that the judge probably will grant him an injunction that will allow him to continue playing. And like I said, if he's granted the injunction, he's probably going to play the rest of the year. What would that do to the roster, to the mindset of that program, if his injunction is not granted and his college basketball days end right then and there? Does that judge have the stones to make that kind of decision if his legal mind tells him that it's the right decision? We would hope he would do the right thing by the law and by the parties to the lawsuit, and not be influenced by where he practices law or where he sits on the bench. Based on his history, and we're not going to go into it, he is certainly willing to do that. So Alabama has 3 very important contests this week, and it needs to go 3-0. It needs to beat Texas A&M on Wednesday. It needs to win that injunction on Friday, and then it needs to beat Auburn in the jungle on Saturday. And none of those will be easy. And if they don't win all 3, say they win the injunction but lose both games, say they win the injunction but split the games, there are going to be even more questions about this Alabama basketball team and this Alabama basketball season and whether this support that they've given to Charles Bediako. Remember, this was Charles Bediako's idea in the first place. Once James Najee got eligible at Baylor, he and his team decided that there was so much inconsistency in the NCAA's enforcement of its eligibility standards that it was worth a shot to try to get Charles one last semester of college basketball. And so far, it's worked in terms of getting him on the court. But so far, it hasn't been so good in terms of Alabama's bottom line. As I said, they're 1-2 with Bediako in the lineup. Good. He's been a contributor. He didn't do much on, what did he have? 6.7 rebounds, fouled out, and was no match for the three-headed monster of Florida inside with Houck, Condon, and Chinyelu. I love Ruben Chinyelu as a player. So at some point, as I said, down the line, when the season's over, everybody connected to Alabama is going to have to ask themselves, was this worth it? You believe in Charles Bediako as a person, as a player, as a student. You believe you're helping him get his degree, which, by the way, he could do without playing college basketball. He can always go back and take classes. But they believe they're doing the right thing by Charles Bediako. Is this the right thing for Alabama basketball? And that's where the scoreboard, to a large degree, will provide the answer. And that answer on Sunday was triple ugly. All right, that's going to do it for me for today. I'm Kevin Skarbinski. This is Scarbo Knows. Thank you for watching on the Sidelines.live network. Thank you for tuning in. If you're checking us out on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Don't cost nothing, as Bluto likes to say in Animal House. And make sure you also check out our sponsor, Money Management Services. They've been helping Alabamians and people beyond with their financial needs since 1992. They're good friends of mine. They'll take great care of you. Let's hear from them next. Until next time, I'm Kevin Skarbinski. See you.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family, because when you walk through our doors, you become part of ours.